Before I start this video, please subscribe to our channel. Story 1. Last night, I went to my girlfriend's apartment to spend the night. After I arrived, I locked all the doors and turned off the lights since she was already asleep in her room. I lay down next to her, and we both fell asleep almost immediately. We were both in a semi-conscious state when she shifted positions in her sleep and kissed me. Shortly after, we were both jolted awake by a loud voice coming from the open door of her room. It was a deep male voice, but I can't remember much beyond that because my adrenaline kicked in, and I immediately assumed someone was in the apartment with us. We couldn't recall the exact words, but it was incredibly loud. I was scared, thinking there was an intruder in the apartment. I quickly covered my girlfriend's mouth as she was panicking, and I could tell she also thought someone had broken in. I motioned for her to be quiet, then got up, turned on all the lights and checked the entire apartment. There was nothing. All the doors were still locked, and I searched every spot someone could hide, but found nothing. After the incident, I tried to make sense of it, but I could only conclude it must have been some kind of entity. I paid attention to certain details while trying to figure out what happened. You can hear the neighbors from anywhere in the building, but only if they're yelling or stomping, and even then, it's muffled through the walls or floors. The voice was too loud to have come from that. The window in her room was open because it was hot, and I checked outside. There were no footprints around the window, which is odd because we live in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, where there's a lot of snow. So, that ruled out any chance of someone being outside. My girlfriend's dog was lying between my legs when we heard the voice, and she was still asleep when I got up to check, so it wasn't the dog either. We were both completely confused by what had happened. A few nights later, I spent the night again and noticed that her closet door, which we had confirmed was shut before bed, was now wide open. This was after I felt a hand pressing against the pillow next to my face. The pressure of it woke me up, and when I looked, I saw an imprint of what looked like a large hand on the pillow. While I was looking at the pillow, I noticed the closet door was open, and her dog was lying on the floor, staring at it. I don't know what this means, but I know something is happening, and I need to figure it out. Before I start a second story, please like this video. Story 2, my grandmother on my mother's side was always considered to be our family's crazy one. Long before I was born, the marriage to my mother's father had failed because my grandmother was far too interested in witchcraft. My grandmother really liked astrology, which was considered witchcraft by my grandfather's very Catholic family. Growing up, she used to tell me stories about the fairies that lived in her garden, and how I should never leave my shoes outside at night because the gnomes might steal them. As a child of the 90s, I was in love with Disney, so all of Grandma's stories seemed to be just that. Stories. There were always rules at Grandma's house. Most certainly not your typical ones. Things like leaving the windows open at night so the frogs could come in, and making sure not to step on any of the frogs. If you baked something, you had to leave a small piece for the fairies, or things would start to go missing. Odd rules, but as a kid, it was fun. Now, my grandmother was a hoarder for my entire life, the type who had a trail from one end of the house to the other, with everything else stacked floor to ceiling. She never hoarded trash. It was always useful things, just things she was probably never going to use herself, but needed to have just in case. And food, oh Lord, did that woman hoard food. My grandmother grew up during the Great Depression, constantly having to move around and leave everything she owned behind each time. Once she grew up and was able to create her own stability, she started hoarding. My mother says my grandmother started hoarding when my mother was a teen and never stopped. Most of the things she would collect came from Goodwill, flea markets, garage sales, and pretty much unwanted secondhand items. Something else I feel I should mention. I am the youngest child of 3. My 2 older siblings are my half-siblings. My sister and I share the same father, and my brother and I share the same mother. My brother was around 4 or 5 when my parents met, meaning I wasn't the first grandchild my grandma had, but I was the only one she seemed to like. My siblings were never invited to her house or really welcomed there at all. My grandmother treated my siblings as though they didn't exist. Me, on the other hand, she would call my parents constantly to ask when we were going to be in the valley next, and if they would like to bring me to her house to spend the weekend. Neither of my siblings ever stayed the night at Grandma's house. I feel as though the above information is important as to why I'm making this post. I was 13 at the time I brought him home. I had spent a weekend with that grandmother while my parents were staying at another relative's house not far from there. This was pretty normal. As stated before, I seemed to be the only family member she liked. Well, that weekend, my grandmother gave me a music box and a porcelain doll. I collected porcelain dolls, so I didn't think much of it at the time. I didn't think anything of it when she gave me the doll. She told me to take care of him, that he's very special, and I needed to be sure to give him the love and attention he deserves. I was instructed to wind and play him at least once a month. Okay, whatever you say, Grandma. My mother and she ended up having a falling out, and I was told that if I wanted to see her or speak to her, I would have to find my own way of doing so. As far as my mother was concerned, she was dead to our family. To this day, I have no idea what their falling out was over. There's a lot to cover between the time I was 13 and 18. The strangest event of them all happened when I was 15. I had to have an emergency neck surgery because a mass had appeared and started cutting off blood flow to my brain. If I hadn't gone to the hospital for my neck being sore, I could have died. Fast forward to Mother's Day, 2011. I was 18 at the time. Every 4 years or so, my grandmother's birthday would fall on Mother's Day, and it did so on that day. I hadn't talked to her for a few years at that point since I wasn't allowed to use the house phone to contact her, and for the longest time, no one would give me her phone number. I eventually got her number and called her. The conversation went like this. "Hey, Grandma, it's me. I just wanted to call you to wish you a happy birthday and Mother's Day. Do you have anything special going on?" "Oh, goodness. I thought I'd never get to speak to you again. Surprised that explicit mother of yours let you call me." "Yeah, sorry I haven't called sooner, but I've really missed you, Grandma. How would you feel about me making a trip up there to see you soon?" "Oh, that would be wonderful. We can finally talk about all the things your mother has been hiding from you. She's been lying to you your whole life about who you really are. Embrace it. You need to confront your mother and demand she tell you what she's been keeping from you. Okay, Gram. So what do you think of me coming to see you soon? I'd really like to catch up with you. I've missed you so much. Do you think you can come to my high school graduation next month? Yes, you should definitely come see me. Can you come this next weekend? No, I don't think I can, but I'll try." After a very long silence, she asked, "Do you still have him?" "Who? The jester?" "Yeah, I do. Why?" "Bring him with you." "All right, Grandma. Well, I have to go soon because I'm making dinner tonight, but I love you, and I'll call you again soon." I attempted to call her again a few weeks later to see if she could attend my graduation. She didn't answer. My other phone calls over the next few months went unanswered as well. She died that December. Which brings me to the point of this post, the doll she gave me. I've had it for 10 years now. I've experienced a lot of unexplainable things that I prefer to keep private. But I'd be willing to share those on a one-to-one basis if they could help. However, as far as the noticeable activity that I and my partner have witnessed, here's what happens. Night terrors start if it's not in our bedroom or sleeping space, like the absolute worst I've ever had. Things go missing and turn up in places they shouldn't have been in. It will go through months of sitting alone on a shelf, not being wound or played, but will constantly play single notes or small parts of the song. Our new dog can't stand it. He will wake up from a dead sleep and start blinking and growling like crazy at it. I even have a video of him doing so. I have depression and think back to when I first started to feel the way I do. It was around the time the doll came into my life. I guess what I'm getting at is I need help figuring out if there really is something going on, or if I'm just crazy. I need help to bring him and myself to peace again. There's a whole lot that I wanted to say but haven't been able to. I'd be more than willing to talk to someone if they think they can help. And please, don't recommend sage. You don't think I've tried that? Before I start a third story, please share this video. Story 3. My mother and stepfather bought a house in a 70s-era suburb in the late 90s. I was about 13 at the time, and already dealing with a lot of issues with depression, typical teenager stuff. Things were tense between my older brother and my stepdad, and I wasn't having the best time with parents in general either. So we moved into this house. It seemed fine at first. I had already had some unexplained experiences in other houses we lived in, going as far back as I can remember, and I was looking forward to perhaps not having to deal with that again. Oh man, it did not go down like that. The first thing I remember was one night. My parents hadn't come home from work yet. It was dark out already. It was winter in Canada. And I was sitting in the living room on the main floor when I started hearing muffled voices. It sounded like an old man and a little girl having a conversation. I could hear the gravelly tone of his voice and the high-pitched sing-song quality of hers. But, as is often the case in these stories, I couldn't make out exactly what they were saying. I walked to the basement stairs and leaned over the railing to see what was going on. The sound was definitely coming from down there, where the dark, creepy laundry and storage room was. "Hello," I yelled down. The voices ceased immediately. Good enough for me. I had no interest in investigating further. It happened a few more times, but only when I was alone at night. It didn't really scare me at first. There could be worse things, right? Well, yeah, it got worse. As my mental health started slipping further into depression, my experiences became more intense. More than once, I heard extremely loud pounding coming from the laundry room. It sounded like someone was throwing punches at the washing machine, trying to punch a hole through it. Just that hollow metallic bang, 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 over and over again. The first time it happened, it scared the living daylights out of me, and I'm not easily startled. It was so loud and so intense that I had to go check. The terrifying pounding didn't stop until I made it down the basement stairs and stood in the doorway of the laundry room. Then it stopped immediately. I turned on the light and checked the laundry machines. They were empty and not running. I even called my mom to ask about it. She said no one was doing laundry and it was probably nothing. The second time it happened, again when I was alone, I ran down to check. This time, I was determined to figure it out. Nope, same story. It stopped as soon as I got to the door. The sound was violent and extremely loud, and I was not impressed. I told it to shut the hell up and went back upstairs. It didn't happen again after that, so awesome. I sure told it off, right? Nope. One day, I was talking on the cordless phone to one of my friends. We had been chatting for about a half hour when, all of a sudden, this loud static noise cut off the conversation. A guttural voice, sounding like it was gargling and speaking unintelligibly, came through for about 10 seconds, accompanied by loud static the entire time. Then it cut out. Back with my friend, she immediately asked, "What the hell was that?" And I nearly crapped myself. I didn't think she would hear it on her end, but she absolutely did and described it to me before I said anything to her. So, that's cool, right? No biggie. One night, she came over to sleep because my parents were out of town. Due to my crippling depression, they didn't trust me by myself, so they greenlit her staying over. Everything was normal until the next morning. She slept on the couch in the living room, and I slept in my bed. When I woke up that morning, I got up to go to the bathroom. When I finished and came out, I went into my room to change. On my dresser, one of my candles was lit. My friend was still sleeping on the couch, and she was not the type to play pranks. I wasn't scared about ghosts at that point. I was just pissed that something had started a fire. That's just dangerous. No one would believe me if I said I didn't do it, so I was miffed. I told whatever it was that they couldn't be starting fires, house rules, and it never happened again. Many times, I would be laying in bed at night, staring into the dark, unable to sleep. The dark plays tricks, I know this, but this was still a little weird to me. I heard shuffling in my closet, like someone was going through a box of my stuff. The closet door was open, and I was looking in. It was dark, but I could see something on the top shelf moving. I turned on the light, and there was nothing. This occurrence kept happening at least once a week. I once woke up in the middle of the night freezing. My blankets were down by my feet, which in itself isn't that unusual, so I just grabbed them to pull them up. But it didn't work. I yanked hard on them, and it felt like the blanket was cold and stuck. I used all my strength to pull the goddamn blanket, and it wouldn't budge. At that point, I got scared and decided to go back to sleep without the blanket. I didn't open my eyes during the entire ordeal, and I didn't want to. After that night, I felt my blanket slowly being pulled off me a few times, and I snatched it right back as soon as it started. Not today, ghost. So many times in the night, I would wake up startled and see someone standing at the end of my bed. Whoever it was had long hair, or so I assumed, as the head, neck, and shoulders weren't defined, but it sure was male. He was huge, about 6'4" and beefy. I could only ever see the silhouette, but it was always the same one. Once, I watched it rise, like it was coming out of the floor. That was interesting. I just rolled over and closed my eyes while whatever dude it was crept away. I was tired. It wasn't just the house either. It felt like it was the entire neighborhood that was a little touched. I'd go on walks at night to stabilize myself and keep myself out of trouble, but also to smoke weed, cigarettes, or drink. I was walking down a cement path that goes behind people's houses, like a dog walking path. People's back gates would open onto this path, and you could walk all over the neighborhood without really hitting any streets. It was like a back path maze. About 2 houses down from mine, these people had a wooden gate and a set of about 3 stairs to go into their yard. I'd sit on those stairs a lot and just smoke and chill, trying to center myself mentally. I was going to sit on the stairs as normal, and as I got close enough, I saw what looked like a 2-year-old sitting on them. I got weirded out because what the hell was a kid that age doing alone outside at that time of night? I went closer and noticed that the kid didn't have a friggin' head. I could see him sitting there, hands on his lap, wearing overalls and a striped shirt, but nothing above his neck. He was solid, like a real person, and I could see the neck meet where it looked like his head was severed. No blood, though. So I kept walking. There were parks within stumbling distance of my house, all connected to each other. The first park had a playground, the next one connected to an elementary school, and the third was just trees and grass. I was walking home around 11 p.m. There was snow on the ground, minus 20 Celsius, and low clouds, so the light of the city reflected back and illuminated everything better than a full moon ever could. It was damn near daylight out there, and I could see from one end of the park to the other. At the farthest end, I saw a black form moving quickly. I figured it was a cat or rabbit or something. Then I saw a second one, and then a third. I started getting worried it was coyotes. They moved fast and were definitely running. They crossed back and forth, heading in my direction. They crossed over each other as they got closer, and over the span of about 10 seconds they had gotten about halfway to me. Then they disappeared. At first, I thought maybe they dove under some new snow or something like that. But the entire time, I didn't hear a sound. No crunching snow, no animal calls, nothing. After that, I started getting a really bad feeling anytime I even looked into the park from the street. Fast forward to when I was 23 and had to move back there after screwing up my life. I ended up staying in the basement bedroom since my old room had been converted into a study. One night, I was sitting at my desk reading when I heard something rustling in my closet. It seriously sounded like a raccoon tossing things around, looking for food. I got up and turned on the light. The noise persisted, which confused me because I was used to things stopping when I took notice. I went into the closet and started hauling everything out, convinced I was going to find a mouse or something. The entire time I searched that closet, the noises continued. After hauling the last thing out and scouring for signs of poop or holes, the noises finally stopped. I have many other stories about places I've lived, but these have been some of the more intense ones.